I was with a patient this week. I think you all know that I'm a chaplain at Salem Hospital, but just to be on the safe side, that's why I was with a patient this week who has had a very, very tough life. So many of the patients I meet are struggling with addiction, financial hardship, fragile family dynamics, all kinds of legal worries, both criminal and civil. It's no wonder they become sick enough to be in the hospital. This particular patient, whom I will call Glenn, had many of these on a resume too long for such a young person. So I wondered how this consult would go. We talked a bit, and then Glenn said this to me. There's a lot that'll be going down this week for me, and I just want you to pray for me, that I will stay open to God's will, that my eyes will be open to seeing God, and my ears will be tuned into hearing God, and my heart will feel God's love so much that I will follow where God leads me. Today, we heard a lot about eyes and ears and openness in our readings. All of them talk about it one way or the other. My eyes and ears notice that in each reading, it remains ambiguous whether the eyes and ears to be opened are my own or another's. It's probably both. This week, my ears heard about Saint Phoebe. It happened when someone called my attention to her. Phoebe was an ordained deacon of the church and a benefactor of St. Paul's, as he himself says in his letter to the Romans. Our eyes and ears are not familiar with her because that passage, or might not be familiar with her, because that passage from Romans is never in the lectionary, which means that we never hear it at Mass. And her feast day, which was Friday, is always preempted by St. Gregory. Almost feels on purpose. So sometimes we need one another to help us open our eyes and our ears to those who might otherwise not be immediately visible. The Syrophoenician woman needed to work hard and keep her wits about her in order to be seen and heard. First, she needed to overcome her gender and her nationality in order to intrude on Jesus in his solitude. But she was persistent, like so many others. For example, I think about the hemorrhaging woman who was healed by touching Jesus's garment, despite all the crowds around her. And I also think about the persistent people in our own time, those who fight against voter suppression, those who fight for women's rights, for LGBTQ rights, for the rights of the disabled. Folks like William Barber, who fight against racism and income inequality, environmentalists who work so hard to turn around the politics of climate change. Opening eyes and ears is not a passive thing. It takes hard work. I noticed something, and that is that the reason that Jesus grants the wish of the woman is because of her words. It says so. He says, because of this word, you may go. Jesus, the Logos, the Word, Jesus, who is the Word, recognized a good word being reflected back to him. He saw and heard God's image in the woman. Our words matter, and Jesus hears them. God says so in today's gospel. And so I ask myself, am I willing to hear the words, particularly of people where I consciously or unconsciously consider them to be less worthy, or at least distracting or annoying? Am I? Am I willing to answer the urgent call to speak the word inspired by God's persistent and eternal preference for those who are so often overlooked? And to share that word, that bread, that thing that satisfies, to share that word with all of God's children, and to share everything with all of God's children. And so, like my friend Glenn, my teacher Glenn, I pray, as Glenn did, that we will all stay open to God's word and God's will, that our eyes will be open to seeing God, and our ears will be tuned in to hearing God, and our hearts will feel God's love so much that we will follow where God leads us, no matter where that is, and to speak God's word in a world that needs it so very much. These are my thoughts and reflections. I could go on and on, but these are mine for now, what I was willing to pare it down to. And I invite all to, if you wish to share your thoughts about the readings today.